Good people of YouTube, I'm the Watch Idiot, and this is a video that I've actually been wanting to make since the channel got started 2 years ago, because the Ollech Wajs P-104 is such a cool watch, and it's just so different from all my other watches, and it really is a palate cleanser, just like my 39mm Longines Spirit Zulu Time was, and then also my Seiko SRPK 17. That's because the design is just so bold and different from what you would expect from a pilot's watch, and then throw in the orange to make things that much more different. So in this video, I'm gonna get into the dimensions and my 3 loves and 1 hate/dislike about this watch, and that includes how it wears, obviously, how the dial and bracelet make this watch an absolute joy to wear, but also where the bracelet has some issues. Also, this watch is for sale now, and that's just because I need to get funds to be able to get more watches for the channel, to make even more content for all you guys. And yeah, I really think that the best info can come from when I personally own the watches and really wear the watches for an extended period of time. So yeah, if you're interested, more info in the description and the pinned comment. So yeah, let's get into it. So dimensions first, as always, and yeah, it's very much in my sweet spot for watches, coming in at 39.4mm wide at the case and bezel, and then just 12.4mm thick, including the somewhat raised sapphire crystal. And with that insanely good bracelet that we're definitely going to be getting into later on, the whole thing weighs in at 162 grams, which makes it a very solid and balanced watch on the wrist. And usually watches of this size come in at the 140 to 150 gram mark. So yeah, a lot of solidity if that's what you're looking for. That said, for some people the lug might be a bit long because it comes in at 49.5mm, but the good thing is that the lugs themselves aren't chunky and they come down to help with the wearability, and they have a really cool feature that I'm going to get into in just a second. Going on with how it feels on the wrist, and it pretty much wears exactly the way you'd expect a watch of this size to wear. And the good thing is that it wears just like the 12.4mm thickness would also suggest, because the mid case is raised a bit and it is relatively thin, and part of the thickness is the crystal and the bezel, which is black, which takes away from some of that visual weight when viewing it from the side. Finally, we have a lug width of 20mm, which is always nice to have, and the bracelet tapers down to 18mm. And while I do prefer a 4mm taper, it does work here because this sort of beads of rice design feels well proportioned, and plus the bracelet feel is just on another level. And not only is the 20mm lug width super versatile for strap swapping, but they went a step further by not only drilling the lugs, but they did something that almost no one does, and that's adding a second closer set of lug holes. And that means that you can choose where to place your strap depending on the thickness or how much of a gap you like. And I actually like using it as a sort of micro adjustment, just in case if a strap is just a little bit too tight or a little bit too loose. So yeah, I'm really happy that they included this detail. Oh, and while we're on the specs, it has 300 meters of water resistance, which is definitely overkill for a pilot watch, but yeah, I mean, if they can make it 300 meters without sacrificing the dimensions, then sure, you know, like, why not? Go knock yourself out. Even more peace of mind, I guess. So I wanted to talk about the bracelet here first because it's so good, but the dial is really the star here, and it's a big reason why I got this watch in the first place. I mean, just look at it. It's such a striking dial in terms of its overall design and also the details. I absolutely love the cardinal indices here because they're applied and very three-dimensional, and they're also filled with that orange lume, which just isn't seen very much at all. But on top of that, they went a little bit further by giving these indices a vertical brush, which again is something that you just don't see on very many watches, especially at this price point. And I'm always in favor for brush surfaces, so yeah, the more the merrier. But as cool as the orange lume is, it really just isn't bright at all, which is a bit of a shame. But since it's not a dive watch, I'll definitely take the character the orange lume offers. Then comes the date window, and other Ollech Wajs models have a lume marker below the 6 o'clock date, which as far as I'm concerned is the right position for the date. But here, the slide rule inner bezel takes up that space. So instead of just skipping the window altogether, they included a brushed metal frame, and then they lined the inside with orange lume, which was completely unexpected. And yeah, it's just such a cool little detail. I'm so happy that they just took the time and actually made this happen. Then comes in the coolest slash also weirdest part of the watch, and that's the handset, because in terms of the finish and the shape, they aren't really that crazy. They're boxy rectangles, and the second hand has a lumed filled arrow up at the top. And yeah, the finish is great, but the minute hand has alternating black and orange squares inside, and this is just so much fun. I mean, I keep on looking at this hand whenever I'm looking at the watch. I just love this little bit of flair and the brush surface, and also the overall, how it plays in with the overall design. And yeah, it's just really nice to see a Swiss brand having a little bit of fun. And then also on top of that, the hands really add to the three-dimensionality of the entire dial with those raised indices and also the raised slide rule bezel. And so that's also what gets me about the dial. It's got that fun late 60s and 70s vibe with the boldness and the geometric design, but it's not too weird and dated. You know, it still feels modern. So yeah, I mean, bravo Ollech Wajs for striking that balance in all of the watch designs as well. It's really fun, but also doesn't look like too far-fetched. So now we have the bracelet, and the design is just so good, because I absolutely love beads of rice bracelets. I have it on multiple watches, but sometimes the polish surface can be a bit much for me. So instead, this bracelet is fully brushed, but the actual beads of rice here are angled, which gives the bracelet and watch as a whole a much more updated and modern feel, because this bracelet is basically a modern take on the traditional beads of rice bracelet. And it was this bracelet alongside the dial that made me go for this watch in the first place, because it did take me a few months to have it just dwell in my head and then finally take the plunge. But also on top of the design, the actual build quality and comfort is just fantastic, because a great looking bracelet is completely useless as far as I'm concerned if it feels awful on the wrist and makes you not want to wear the watch in the first place. And this bracelet is one of the most comfortable bracelets that I've ever worn, which in turn makes this one of the most comfortable watches that I've ever owned. And that's even compared to you know, Rolex, Tudor, Omega, and Longines, Grand Seiko, all that. The bracelet itself is solid yet extremely silky and flexible, and I've never had a hair pulled on it, which is amazing. And it can also sort of slide this way on my wrist, which is something that I absolutely need to happen on a bracelet, because I don't like it when it's just like stuck in one place. Can't stand that. But part of the comfort is the balance, and because it's a bit of a chunky bracelet, it feels super balanced alongside the normal size watch head. So overall, it just feels really comfortable, and it's not tiring in any way. Next up, we have the slide rule bezel, and this is something that for me is always fun to use, and it's a huge reason why I wanted to get a Navitimer at some point. The look of the bezel is really nice. I mean, I like that the top surface has a radial brush on it, and then while I'm usually not a big fan of fully black bezels versus black inserts on a steel bezel, I feel like it works here, because the watch is already so different, so that extra bit of change just kind of goes with the character of the watch. Then the stationary slide rule track is inside the watch as a raised gray track, which I like a lot because it adds yet another visual element to the dial without feeling excessive, because slide rule watches can often look a bit too crazy on the dial if it's not done right. And as far as the slide rule itself goes, it's really fun to use it to convert kilometers to miles whenever I see speeds in kilometers per hour in videos, and then kilos to pounds. And at the start, I used to know how to do percentages, multiplication, division, things like that. And while I can't remember exactly how to do it right now, it's actually much easier to figure out than you would expect. And yeah, I'm not at all a math person, so yeah, take that for what it is. And to me, I just find slide rules just fascinating, because there isn't any sort of machinery and computer chips at play here, just two things that have no inherent active use. I mean, in this case, just steel and maybe some plastic, yet you can just move them around and you can use it to do all sorts of conversions and calculations. I mean, it's just mind-boggling to me, and it's just so cool. And now on to the dislike. And yeah, you might have noticed that I didn't talk about the clasp in the bracelet section, and that's because it's just nothing special. It isn't inherently bad. I mean, it works fine, but it's just something that I think that they could have spent more time on, given how good the rest of the bracelet and the watch is, for that matter. The clasp itself is just stamped steel, and it's not necessarily bad looking. It's pretty simple, but it would have been nice to have seen a milled clasp, or maybe if they're just stretching a little bit more, a really nice quick adjust clasp. But again, given how unbelievably comfortable the watch is as a whole, and the bracelet, and how good the bracelet feels, I'm not entirely too fussed by it, because in the end, the most important thing to me is comfort. And if you really want to, you can swap out the clasp just using the spring bars and just buy on Amazon a 18mm milled clasp. It's not that hard. I've done that before. And that's what I do with all my Seikos, for that matter. So there you have it. Let me know what you think about the P-104 in the comments. And of course, if you want to buy mine, the info is in the pinned comment and the description. And as always, hit the like button if you enjoyed the video, and if you hit the subscribe button also if you want to see more. And yeah, until the next video, good day.